Yeah, hi, nice to see you. Even though the price of Bitcoin is below 4,000 and the price of Ether is below 150, this means that you're here for the content. Sorry?
It's about 40.
Oh, it's about, yeah, okay, euros or USD, whatever you do. So yeah, it's good that you're here for the content and not for the speculative reasons. So yeah, I'm Aljaž Jadek. I'm from law office Jadek Pensa, which is a top-tier full-service law office, where we have established a team called New Tech. It's a team of dedicated lawyers for the new technologies, where we work with startups, companies, and also Slovenian blue chips. So we have some experience, and we share this experience through the community and through the talks with the regulators and the Blockchain Think Tank, which I will discuss later on. So my presentation is actually divided into three parts. In first part, I will try to explain generally how the regulation is developed and how I'll generally talk about regulation. In the second part, I will talk about the regulation specifically in Slovenia, and then in the third part, I will talk about more about the Blockchain Think Tank and how we work there and how the regulation gets adopted there. So, for the icebreaker, let's try to bust the myth regarding the code is law. You can hear quite often the developers saying that the code is law, which means actually they try to explain that the computer code represents the law and shall somehow replace it, which means that the computer code is starting to regulate and govern the social relationships. They try to reason this thinking on three actually reasons, and one is that they don't trust the existing judicial system, and they trust the computer code. I talked to one of the developers, and he explained me that he prefers to sign a smart contract and to conclude a smart contract than a real contract, because he knows what will happen out of the smart contract, and he actually is skeptical about the real contract because he doesn't know if the counterparty will execute the contract, or if the counterparty will not execute it, how will the court judge the whole relationship and what the outcome is. So he says that I would rather conclude a smart contract. So this is one of the reasons. The second one is what we've also heard today, it's the challenge of decentralization. They usually think that because the technology is decentralized, the relationship cannot be put into any of the jurisdictions. And of course, the third reason is they think that the lack of the legal regulation of these type of transactions, that's why the code should be the one which is dictating the social relationships and not the law. So here in our law office, we faced many difficulties with this thinking, because the code will never be able to actually get the intent of the people who concluded these contracts. And the code is usually written by a small group of developers, which do not cover the general legal field. They are just focused on these small segments of the relationships. And it's of course the challenge is also that all these relationships shall be assessed by current regulation. So I think we can easily say that this myth is busted, and also, but we must know also that the computer code can actually regulate better some smaller and more narrow relationships regarding the parties, because the execution of the relationship is automatic and cheaper. So there are some benefits also out of the computer code regulating social relationships. So if we talk about how the regulation is born, how the regulation is actually adopted, it's usually the case that a new social relationship is developed in time. So it starts to develop, and in this case we can say that this new social relationship is blockchain technology, and we see that the development of the relationship goes up and down. And when the this new social relationship is sufficiently developed, the new regulation comes. And this doesn't mean that until then the new social relationship is not regulated. It means just that the new social relationship is regulated with the current regulation, which is sometimes not suitable for this new social relationship. But it doesn't mean that it's not applicable for this new social relationship. So in European Union we have this. The European Union actually follows the principle of technology neutrality, where all the regulation needs to be written in a way that it doesn't prefer or penalize any technology, which means that the regulation is applicable for all technologies, also for blockchain technologies. And then we have another principle in the European Union, which is followed by many institutions, Parliament, Commission, also the regulators, ESMA, and also in Slovenia, our government, our regulators, they follow actually the principle of wait and see. They're waiting with the new regulation, and currently they're observing the space, learning, and they're waiting with the regulation. That's because they want to adopt a regulation which will cover the new relationship in a proper manner, and it will cover the risks. They think that if they will adopt a new regulation too soon, it won't cover the risk and won't cover the proper relationship. So it's now we are in a state that everybody is learning, getting grasp of the technology, and we are waiting for the new technology. And another interesting aspect here in this, for the beginning, is that we all know that the blockchain technologies, they eliminate the middleman. And the current regulation is usually written in a way that it regulates this middleman. So the technology enables us to eliminate it, and the whole regulation is written for the regulation of this middleman. So this is an interesting topic and an interesting thing that we'll also discuss later on. So if we check, an example, it's from the insurance field, and we'll assess this project through Slovenian law. So we'll see where there is a mismatch of a new business model with the current regulation. So I don't know how many of you know the project Eterisk. It's a project where they insure the delay of the flight delay. It's automatic insurance of the flight delay. You put data and you insure it, and the smart contract checks on with the oracles checks if the flight was delayed, and if the flight was delayed, the smart contract automatically pays you the insurance fee if the flight is actually delayed. So when they started to bring this project to life, they were thinking that they will eliminate the middleman. They say that this is a peer-to-peer insurance without middleman. They said that they will base their product on the principle of free regulation of obligation relationship, and there will be no insurance involved, and they were actually thinking about that there would be a DAO, which is the decentralized autonomous organization, which will live in the internet space without the actual establishment in the real world. So this was their initial thought. So if we check it through Slovenian legislation, we have this insurance law which regulates the insurance companies, which need to have the authorization by the insurance supervision agency. As well, we have the insurance broker, which is also a person which has a license obtained by the insurance supervision agency. So we have two entities which are regulated, as well as we have some activities which are also regulated. There are insurance brokerage activities which are actually which are considered as intervention with conclusion of the contract, with preparation for conclusion of the contract, and with the assistance and exercise rights of the insurance contract. So these are also the activities which are regulated. So we somehow see that some of these topics are covered in the project of Eterisk. So if we want to further analyze it, what is the case with Eterisk? We need to check all the
transactions or the relationship in the EtherX project, and we need to ask ourselves the question: who in this project carries out the insurance business, or who actually does the insurance brokerage activities? And to figure out this, we need to ask further questions regarding, for example, who bears the risk in the project, who executes the contracts, who controls the computer code, what's the role of the EtherX, who helps with the conclusion and execution of the contracts, how is with the payments, with the profit, and who makes the decisions. For example, these are example questions you would ask in the analysis, and the outcome would be, with the answers to this question, you would figure out who is the insurance company and who is the insurance brokerage. And probably the guys at EtherX did the same analysis, and after 6 months of their project, they figure out that they will not be able to eliminate the middleman. Actually, it was probably too risky for them. That's why they stopped saying that they will eliminate the middleman. And they said that our platform, our EtherX platform, will be linked to one of the insurance companies. So they actually switched their business model because of the regulation. So we see that the new regulation, that the current regulation actually is not suitable for this new business model, which enable elimination of middlemen, and the new business rules will need to be adopted for such business models. For sure, it will be more demanding because there will be no central entity which will be regulated. There will be many more stakeholders which will need to be somehow regulated. So this new regulation will need to take care of this as well. If we look at some solutions of this new regulation, and these are just exemplified just cases which we need to think about it. Maybe we could regulate the centralized services. To regulate services means to regulate the exchange service or regulate custody, for example. Or we have the next one, it's the regulation of data processors. So we have here regulation of maybe Google, or maybe regulation of the social networks, where we already saw in the past where the social networks ban the marketing of ICOs. We have the regulation of different stakeholders. Maybe there will be regulation of the mining, or maybe there will be regulation of the nodes or other stakeholders in these equations. Then we have the regulation of the underlying internet protocols, where we have seen some examples in China, maybe not the best one, but also the net neutrality goes to this regulation of these underlying protocols. Maybe somehow regulate the end user, which is quite difficult, or maybe even regulation of hardware manufacturers, where the hardware should be regulated and some, I don't know, backdoors should be put into place. These are just thoughts. Some of them are already in existence. Some of them are probably really bad for the development of the technology. But these are topics, solutions which the regulators in the government should think of. So if we go to the next stage, where we will discuss a little bit the current regulation in Slovenia, where since the big hype of this new technology, 2016-2017, in Slovenia there was no adoption of any new laws, so we need to assess all the transaction, all the business model through the current regulation. So these are the main legal fields which need to be observed. For example, intellectual property. Of course, all the projects involve somehow the computer code, which is or licensed or it's open source. So this need to be taken care of. Then we have usually projects are they include some know-how, or they have some business secrets which need to be protected, or we have even maybe some advanced technological solutions which could be patented. So this is how it could be secured. Then we have personal data protection, which will be addressed on a later panel. Maybe I can just open some questions for them later on. Of course, the data protection is quite important topic here. First of all, we need to ask ourselves what is personal data, if the wallet address represents a personal data, and to which stage of aggregation of data we need to come so we don't have the personal data anymore. Then another interesting topic here is if you put the data into the blockchain, what happens with the nodes? The nodes become and the miners become the data processors. If these nodes and miners are outside of European Union, then you need to comply also with the regulation regarding the transfer of data to third countries. And of course, we have this right to be forgotten, which is somehow contradicting against the immutability of the blockchain. So these are the main topics which probably will be addressed also on the panel. And then we have another very important point here is liability. We face some nasty cases in our office regarding this. We need to know that all these projects are first of all, they are startups. Usually they are startups, and they are actually dealing with the unproven technology, which bears higher risk regarding their activities. And we know that the professional activities need to be observed with a higher diligence, there is also a case that the disclaimer of liability for gross negligence and for the intent cannot be excluded. So the companies which deal with this new project, new technology need to take into account the liability of their activities. And then we have the taxes, which was quite well addressed in Slovenia. Of course, there was a big issue regarding the taxation of ICOs and the issue of taxation of the trading with cryptocurrency, which was quite well addressed. So we have, I think, more or less clear skies there. Taxation is also important for the companies which involve these new technologies, because they involve new relationship which needs to be analyzed and see which tax actually is applicable and how to apply this tax for this new relationship between the companies. Between the entities. And then you have, again, you have this project-specific legal regulation, which is, for example, of interest. You have this insurance regulation. I don't know if you have a project for field of banking, you have banking regulation and so on. So this also needs to be observed. And then we have a second field of regulation where which needs to be addressed if the company uses cryptocurrencies or the token mechanics. Of course, the most important one is, and the only law which actually in Slovenia has definition of cryptocurrency is the AML law, the Prevention of Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing in Slovenia, which we have the exchanges as well as in Slovenia the companies which manage the issuance of the cryptocurrencies and which manage actually the cryptocurrencies are considered as obliged entities which need to do all the activities to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. So this is the current regulation. And this is also the first EU-wide legislation which will be applicable for the whole region, and this is the AML 5 directive, which will impose the definition of obliged entities as exchanges and the wallet custodians. So this will be EU-wide in 2020. At the end of the year, we need to implement it. And then another very interesting topic is the financial instruments. In Slovenia, we have the case that, according to opinion of our regulator, Security Market Authority, the ATVP, we have their reasoning is that the securities cannot be issued as tokens because the security can be issued only as in a paper form or in a clearing house, which is not the case for tokens. as well as the security needs to include the issuer as well as the right which carries. So, and this is also, they see this as a formal reason why the tokens cannot be securities. But nevertheless, we have some other fields, some other topics which could be used. These are the investment funds legislation and e-money legislation, which is now quite interesting for the companies. And we have the derivatives regulation. So this can be observed and followed by this financial instrument. And then again, we have the consumer protection, which also applies if the sale of the token represents sale of the goods or services. There the consumer protection needs to be followed by, and there we have this regulation regarding distance sale of the product and unfair marketing of the product. So this is also one topic which needs to be addressed. And then we have, on the end, we have self-regulation, where we see that the self-regulation actually represents some regulation which is adopted by the stakeholders, by the interest group, which adopt some rules for themselves. And I think in the crypto space we are now in the period of self-regulation, where the crypto entities try to self-regulate themselves. Of course, this is possible only if the current regulation doesn't regulate their obligations, and when there is absence of this national regulation, then the self-regulation can be applicable. And we have different levels of self-regulation. We have international level and the Slovenian level. In the international level, nice example was self-regulation of exchanges, where they started to impose their rules for themselves. They want to be compliant, and they just wrote rules for themselves. And then in 2017, it was a nice case where ICOs at the beginning of the year, none of the ICOs did the KYC, and then at the end of the year, all the ICOs did the KYC. So this is also was an act of self-regulation of the international scene. And in Slovenia, we have in Blockchain Think Tank, we introduced the guidance for issuing tokens for the ICOs, where we described all the terms and conditions which we propose to comply with, and this is also an act of self-regulation on the Slovenian level. Of course, we have pros and cons of the self-regulation. Some good cases are that good topic about self-regulation is that it can be adopted fast. It is usually not too restrictive, and it's adopted by people who know the technology. The bad thing about self-regulation is that it's difficult to execute it, it's difficult to impose it, and it's difficult because it's not adopted transparently, and it's adopted only for a narrower field, and it's not considering the whole legal aspects of the broader topic. So there are some pros and cons to the self-regulation. So we came to the last part, where I'll talk about Blockchain Think Tank. I'm their head of the working group on regulation since the beginning, and I'm also their member of the management board. And Blockchain Think Tank actually is an NGO, but it was actually established on the initiative of the government. So we had some push there also. So we try to be an open platform where different ideas are exchanged, brainstormed, discussed on a broader, higher level, when we try to use our communication channels to the government, to the regulators, and to the other government organization, when we try to discuss all these general and more broader topics to them, and not to discuss these narrow project-specific questions where the regulators, the government, would get confused. So it's better to introduce a whole picture to them. So our main tasks are to educate and to raise the awareness, to share the knowledge, and of course try to prepare some legislation, some initiative to change the legislation and other proposals. We are actually working in the 5 working groups. We have a working group on regulation, taxation, and fintech, energy, and smart cities and logistics. So we actually work together. If energy working group has a regulation question, they address it to us. So we are actually working together and try to find some solution. And in our working group on regulation, we were quite active. On the beginning, we prepared a document with key open issues on topic of blockchain technologies, and then we sent it to all the regulators. We met with all the regulators, discussed the topics with them, tried to explain what the topics are, and get their feedback, what they think of these topics. And then we managed to, we addressed the red flag, one of the red flags, which is the AML law. We tried to, we prepared the initiative to start the process of amending this law, which is quite restrictive here in Slovenia. And we also made us an initiative on the field of energy, where we helped, we tried to help to amend the regulation on the availability of data on consumption of electricity, which some of you might know that it's quite a hot topic in the energy sector. And of course, our main document was the guidelines for fundraising for the ICOs, where we address in greater details all the terms and conditions under which the ICOs are acceptable in Slovenia and not. And our future activities are mainly addressing, we try to address the AML discussion, and then it will follow discussion brainstorming on stable coins and security tokens here in Slovenia. And then we have also, we see a very good point for the future is also the corporate governance with help of the blockchain technologies. So for the conclusion, I'll just say it's good to know and important to know that the regulation is very important and needs to be considered. And for sure, the current legislation and regulation applies, and it needs to be observed. So these are the main topics which all the projects need to know. And of course, the new regulation is coming. And I was a couple of months ago, I was in Brussels talking to some of the representatives of the Commission, and I heard that they are prepared. They are thinking, as I said, they are waiting and seeing, but they are prepared. They are thinking of maybe changing the regulation on the security tokens in 2022. So it will be addressed here in Slovenia in 2024. So it's a quite long stretch for this. But yeah, you guys, you can help in also in this respect that you are trying to promote self-regulation. You can join our group in Blockchain Think Tank and try to figure out what regulation is appropriate for the project and for the community, and will maybe make some progress in this respect. So thanks for your attention, and if you have any questions, you can reach me out or maybe have a discussion later.